one of the initiatives that was passed into law by the legislature last year was Initiative 2081, which of course had to do with parental rights. We call it the Parental Bill of Rights, and it said that parents are the primary stakeholder in their kids' lives. And parents have a right to know what's happening with their kids at school. Parents have a right to know if their kids are being given mental health medication at school, if their kids are seeing a therapist for depression, if their child goes to school and identifies as a different name and a different gender. Parents have a right to know those things. And parents have a right to help their child navigate what can be, yes, a confusing time in a young person's life, especially in 2024 in America. So the legislature, run by Democrats, even though they do not agree with those sentiments whatsoever, they passed the Parental Bill of Rights into law. Why did they do that? We've talked about this a lot, but I want to underscore it for people who might be new to this conversation. They passed it into law almost unanimously because they didn't want to see it end up on the ballot. And those were the two options. Either they pass it or it goes to voters. They didn't want it to go to voters because they knew voters would pass it. They knew it would be a no-brainer that voters would say, yeah, I want to have parental rights in schools. Parents deserve to know what's happening with their kids at school. So they passed it because they didn't want it to go to voters. They don't want voters telling them that parents should have rights when it comes to what's happening with their kids in school. But they also passed it because if you pass an initiative via the legislature as opposed to voters passing it, that gives lawmakers far more power to be able to come back and undo it. And that's exactly what they're doing. So we talked about last week the Senate version of this bill. The House version of this bill had a hearing this morning in Olympia, 8 a.m. Was it 9 a.m.? 8 a.m., 8 a.m., 9 a.m.? Bright and early. No, it was 8 a.m. Bright and early, yeah. As if they bury the most important bills, 8 a.m., and then they put this bill last and then rushed through testimony. Oh, we're short for time. The most important bill that the Education Committee in the House was going to hear the entire day, for the entire committee, they put it last. They gave everything else before it all this time. And they crushed this to the last and said, oh, we got to speed up testimony. Sorry, we don't have room for the 55 people who showed up to testify. It is House Bill 1296. House Bill 1296 will undo some of the key provisions of the Parental Bill of Rights. They have no shame. They have no shame. They passed the bill into law, the initiative into law last year, knowing damn well that they would come back this legislative session and they would undo it. And they undo in this bill, 1296, some of the most important provisions, the most important aspects of the Parental Bill of Rights that got people to sign the initiative in the first place. About medications and medical care your kids might be receiving at school, mental health care, what's going on with your kids from a gender identity perspective. You know, they want to preach so much about how, oh, if you're going through if you're a transgender youth, you know, your life is very difficult for you, yet they want to cut you off from your parents and don't believe that your parents have a right to know that any of that is going on with you. So they're basically throwing the Parental Rights Initiative out the window with this. So I have a lot I want to play from the hearing this morning. I'll start with Representative Monica Stonier, who is the lead sponsor of House Bill 1296, a Democrat, who wanted to take a moment in introducing the bill to the committee to speak directly to kids.
For students who may be paying attention, whether you be wildly successful in school, whether you be with or without a home or documentation, whether you need support through an IEP or language support, and whether you identify as straight, gay, trans, however you show up, your success is our responsibility, and that's why I've offered the bill before you for the consideration of this committee.
And in saying that, she proves our point. She makes an argument for us. The success of our children is not your responsibility, Representative. You know, people want to talk often about, oh, it's a community. You know, raising kids is a community. No, you want to raise our kids in the way you see fit, with your political ideology, with your extreme gender ideology, and then you have the nerve to sit there and say, your success is our responsibility. Okay, if you're using the collective our, so is it not the parent's responsibility too, to help make sure and be part of ensuring that their child leads a successful life? And what I would also say to that for this Democratic lawmaker who, the legislature and Democrats and schools, your success is our responsibility, and we're taking that back. How much success has there been? And what's your barometer for success? Because test scores are in the toilet, attendance is down, enrollment is down. So if the success of our kids is your responsibility, you're doing a pretty shitty job. And maybe we should take that responsibility back as parents. And that's what parents asked for with the Parental Bill of Rights. Representative Travis Couture, a Republican, asked a question that I'm sure a lot of parents would have asked of Representative Stonier if they were there.
As staff stated, this erases the rights outlined in the Parents' Bill of Rights that was bipartisanly passed off the...
Do you have a question, Representative
Yes, I do,
Couture?
Madam Chair. I'm getting to it.
You're taking away from public testimony, so please get to the question.
All right, here's my question. Why do you want schools to hide information about my kids from me? And what gives schools the right to decide what me as a parent deserve to know about my own children? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Representative Couture. I imagine we will have a longer conversation about this after testimony, and I welcome a meeting with you and find time in your calendar to discuss just this. The rights of parents that were passed in the initiative and that we have discussed here in this committee do exist in other parts of statute. And if there is question about whether or not that information should be clearer, I welcome your feedback.
What a bullshit answer. Absolutely. I mean, first of all, that's how she answered every difficult question, is that we could talk about this more later. No, that's what the public hearing is for. She said that multiple times to Republican state lawmakers who asked her legitimate questions. Well, I'm sure we can meet later. I'd love to meet with you. Well, isn't that nice? You'd love to meet with them behind closed doors because you don't want to answer their question, because you don't have a good answer to their question. Well, the public can all see it. Like, that's so convenient. And for her to say and repeat the lie that these rights for parents are codified elsewhere in state statute just isn't true. That's what Democrats said, remember, last year when they passed the Parental Bill of Rights. Well, we can pass this because these protections are already in law for parents, so this Bill of Rights really doesn't do anything. Okay, if it doesn't do anything, then why are you going through it with a big fat Sharpie marker this year? If it didn't do anything, why do you feel the need to undo it less than a year later? That doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? Now, if you had any doubt in the world that this is about the left trying to force their politics and their extreme gender ideology on kids, if you had any doubt in the world that that's what this is about, being able to indoctrinate kids in our public schools, I want you to listen to the testimony in favor of this bill to undo the Parental Bill of Rights from a woman named Tracy Castro Gill.
My name is Dr. Tracy Castro Gill. My pronouns are they, them. I am a disabled queer Chicanekis educator and scholar in Washington State with my expertise on curriculum and instruction. These are markers that were made illegal recently in the federal government. However, my very presence and humanity is in opposition to that legislation. I want to remind us that George Orwell, in his novel 1984, warned us about limiting how we are allowed to define ourselves and our experiences, and how that allows fascism to take root. Teachers have historically held the gap between humanity and fascism, often becoming the primary targets of fascist regimes, and we're seeing that play out currently.
Excuse me, can you keep your focus on the provisions of this bill?
Yes.
And may I also just ask, you signed in pro. Mm-hmm. Is that your testimony?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. Please continue.
Yes, and so the fact that teachers have stood in the gap and are the primary targets are why I'm testifying pro, because of the protections for educators. Educators, as we've heard from students, are often the people who foster student identity and development, and are currently being targeted and pushed out of their positions because of this fact. I also teach at the University of Washington and hear the curriculum violence and harm and how they're being erased in their K-12 programs, much the way that I and other gender expansive people were erased by Representative McIntyre in this very room today.
Excuse me, ma'am. We don't impugn members. Please proceed carefully.
Thank you. So I ask that we amend the legislation. I am in favor of it, but we amend it to add stronger protections for educators, including existing language in the CCDEI and the Ethnic Studies OSPI framework that provide support for teaching about race and racism.
Thank you.
Like, look, I can laugh about that. That is ridiculous. That's an absolute clown show. But in reality, you can tell a lot about the purpose of a bill by paying close attention to the people who support it and what their motivations are and what they care about and what their end game might be. And in truth, besides all of her various pronouns and things that describe her, we actually know a lot about Tracy Castro Gill. It's interesting that she wants this bill to include more protections for teachers because she herself was an educator in the Seattle Public School District, one of the wokest school districts in the nation, but she was considered so extreme that she lost her job even with SPS. In fact, the Daily Wire did an investigative report on Tracy Castro Gill, the woman you just heard from, back in 2022. The headline, "Meet the Seattle School's woke indoctrination czar who married a child molester." And they share a lot about her background and how she operated within the Seattle Public School District. It says, at the forefront of Seattle Public Schools initiatives around gender and race was Tracy Castro Gill. Until recently, its director of ethnic studies, who represented herself as a fierce Chicana who overcame homelessness and was willing to take on racism no matter who she had to battle, turning schools into vehicles for social change. Castro Gill, it turned out, was a perennial unhappy, toxic liar, one who misrepresented her background to the point that her own father compared her to Rachel Dolezal, the white woman who pretended to be black, and who was ultimately pushed out of her job for repeated misconduct. A focus on racial oppression did not create resiliency, but rather despondency, with Castro Gill and 3 other racial justice leaders going on paid leave from SPS for mental health issues in 2019 alone. As Castro Gill used children for politics in the workplace, her personal life also raised questions about the cost that can incur. She married a convicted child molester and moved her young daughter in with him. Then, her previous ex-husband told me she pressured her child, who had serious mental impairments, to become gender non-binary. And that is the kind of person who is a big, big fan of House Bill 1296. A trans, disabled, queer, Chicanx educational scholar who believes Trump's a fascist, who married a child molester, moved her young daughter in with them, and then, according to her ex-husband, pressured her young daughter, despite her serious mental impairments, to become gender non-binary. That's the person who gets to sit before legislative leaders in Olympia and advocate for you to have your parental rights stripped from you. To advocate for teachers and educators like herself to be able to keep secrets from parents about what's going on with their kids at school. That tells you everything you need to know about the motivations behind House Bill 1296 and the motivations of the Democratic majority in Olympia. And those motivations are extreme. They're out of line with, I think, what most Washington families want, which of course is why they didn't want this to go to the ballot, because it would be much harder for them to sit there and make these arguments against parental rights if the voters of the state of Washington on the ballot said they want them. And that's just one of the many ways that they seek to undo and undermine the initiative process. I want to play a few more things. You heard, I just want to explain something that she said. Can you just play the back half of that, those comments from that person?
I also teach at the University of Washington and hear the curriculum violence and harm and how they're being erased in their K-12 programs, much the way that I and other gender expansive people were erased by Representative McIntyre in this very room today.
Yeah. So what did Representative McIntyre say? Here it is.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Does this legislation bring us closer or further away from the federal direction where they're rightly relying on the science and ridding themselves of the gender expansive nonsense, which isn't really based in science?
Yeah, so he questioned how it was in line with the new federal rules that Trump is putting down. So she got up and said he erased them, completely erased them. I also, though, his question there is relevant. You know, the federal government is going a certain way with all this gender ideology nonsense, as he called it. But Washington State seems to be trying to backpedal in the other direction and go back to how they were a couple years ago with all this gender ideology in schools. The answer, again, I go back to Rep. Monica Stonier, and I want to play the answer she gave him on that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Does this legislation bring us closer or further away from the federal direction where they're rightly relying on the science and ridding themselves of the gender expansive nonsense, which isn't really based in science?
Representative McIntyre, where federal law has been helpful, we have to look to that language, and you heard my question about the language with regard to FERPA. When existing federal law is consistent with the goals of this bill, that language is relied upon and incorporated into the bill.
Wait a second. Can you play that again, that last part? Just play it again.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Does this legislation bring us closer or further away from the federal direction where they're rightly relying on the science and ridding themselves of the gender expansive nonsense, which isn't really based in science?
Representative McIntyre, where federal law has been helpful, we have to look to that language, and you heard my question about the language with regard to FERPA. When existing federal law is consistent with the goals of this bill, that language is relied upon and incorporated into the bill.
Oh, where federal law is consistent with the goals of the bill, federal law is relied upon. So the only federal law that they're weaving throughout the bill is the federal law that they think makes their point. That is a stunning statement. And where federal law is in conflict, they just ignore it. That is a stunning statement for a state lawmaker to make. So again, you have them, almost unanimously, let's pass the Parental Bill of Rights. Oh yeah, we love it. We think it's great. Oh, and actually we already have these protections for parents, so it's sort of redundant, but we'll pass it anyway. Less than a year later, they come back, they introduce the very beginning of the session, a bill to completely unravel it. They also attach, you guessed it, an emergency clause onto the end of it because they know that prevents us from running a referendum on it. So the only sort of recourse you have is to do the initiative process all over again with the Parental Bill of Rights, try to re-solidify the rights that were in there in the first place, and then bypass the legislature completely and send it to the voters. And it's going to cost millions of dollars to do that, hundreds and hundreds of hours of time for volunteers and paid signature gatherers, because they don't care what you think. They don't care about the initiative process. They don't care that it's codified in the Constitution. They will do everything they can to demolish it in order to push their agenda. And again, if the agenda isn't clear, you just have to listen to that woman's testimony. This is about pushing radical gender ideology and their politics on kids. And they think, the state thinks it can do a better job than you can at being a parent. Their teachers can be better at talking to your kids about problems. They're counselors, but you as a parent, you can't be trusted to help your child navigate these complex times. As if parents throughout history haven't helped their teenage kids navigate those precious years those confusing, difficult years before they could become adults. Yeah, but parents in 2024, you can't be trusted. The issues that kids are facing are simply too complex and too confusing. Only teachers can do that. That's not the only thing happening today to undermine the initiative process. Now, I predicted that if Democrats reached supermajorities, they would just try to push through a constitutional amendment to do away with the initiative process altogether. Now, they don't have supermajorities yet. They're very close. They don't have them yet. So they have to find all these backdoor ways and sneaky ways to try to undermine the initiative process. Here is a bill that isn't getting as much attention that seeks to do just that. It is Senate Bill 5382, and it makes changes to the initiative process. Now, some of it sounds sort of in the weeds, and some of it even sounds, dare I say, reasonable. But there's nothing reasonable about it. They will say, and I guarantee it, as this moves through the committee, they will say, these are reasonable steps meant to protect the initiative process. We want to protect the democratic process and your right to initiative. And it will be, as most things they do, complete and utter gaslighting. So there's two key things that Senate Bill 5382 does. So it says, in the language, I'm right, because the language is this: to adequately guard the people's initiative and referendum right against fraud and mistake. Oh my God, thank you. Thank you for trying to adequately guard our right to initiative and referendum. You are so kind. It says the legislature determines that the law must be clarified to require each petition signature gatherer circulating an initiative or referendum petition to sign the declaration under penalty of false swearing. So basically, they want to make it so that if you're out there collecting, you've got this page that has 20 signatures. On every single page, you have to declare that to the best of your knowledge, the signatures are valid at the bottom of it under penalty of false swearing. So you might say, well, that doesn't sound unreasonable. You have some of these signature gatherers who go out and they collect hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of pages. So this is just another step where they want to, if someone forgets, if you're a citizen volunteer, or you're someone out there who's put in hours of time collecting these signatures, they want to be able to, if you forget to sign every single page, they want to nullify the entire page of signatures. Because again, they know that the only people running these initiatives at this point are conservatives, are people who don't agree with them and their policies. So they want you to jump through as many hoops as possible, and they want to look for ways, as many ways as they can find, to invalidate the signatures that you turn in. Now, I will say, I don't believe that that is constitutional. Courts have held that really any effort from the legislature, because the initiative process is designed to hold the legislature accountable, really any efforts for the legislature to further regulate the initiative process have not done well in court. So I'm hopeful that they won't find sort of a sympathetic court, although that's pretty easy in Washington state. But the case law here is pretty clear. And as you go about, and we went out and we collected signatures for initiatives, you don't have to sign the bottom of it. You don't have to right now. They want you to have to because they want to be able to throw out as many as humanly possible. The other aspect of the bill, it says, for purposes of verifying a signature on an initiative or referendum petition, the Secretary of State shall verify that the resident's address on the petition or paper is the same as the resident's address on the affidavit of voter registration. So they want to put even the Secretary of State's office through extra hoops to jump through to verify even if it's a valid voter. Let's say you just moved and you put your new address, but your voter registration is at an old address. They want to nullify your signature. They want to find as many ways as possible to make the initiative process more difficult, more cumbersome, and ultimately less successful. That's exactly what this, and the reason you know that that's what this bill is about is it is entirely sponsored by Democrats. And Democrats would have no motivation to strengthen the initiative process. They would have no motivation, as they say, to adequately guard the people's initiative and referendum rights. And we know that they have spoken poorly about the initiative process. They have no motivation to do something that hurts them electorally or at the ballot box. So anything you see coming from Democrats that is about the initiative process will be about damaging it and undermining it. And that's what this bill is. It's basically a big screw you, Brian Haywood bill. We're going to make it more expensive, more time consuming for you to run initiatives in the future. But it's really not. It's more like screw you voters and screw you democracy. Because Democrats don't want to know what you think. They don't want to hear any dissent. They don't want to hear ideas from the people that they serve. They want to be able to lord over you with their massive majorities and push through any bill that tickles their fancy.